With all the atrocious scenes and stories coming out of the Texas school shooting, we should all be questioning if our government truly has our best interests in mind. Welcome to the garden. We had a great vacation. We went on the Virgin Cruise Line. It was our first trip and found out some interesting things. They were supposed to have their maiden voyage launch back in 2019, but the pandemic set them back. So we actually got to go out as they're figuring themselves out, and it was a really, really cool opportunity. So enjoyed it.
They had themselves figured out well enough to get you taken care of then.
Yeah, it was an interesting cruise. It's very sexually oriented. I'm not kidding you.
Really?
Right when I walked on, my wife and I, we thought we went on a gay cruise, which was really interesting on its own. But as we kind of settled in, what we found out was Richard Branson is absolutely a genius. He invited a bunch of these gay groups onto the cruise ship.
Mm-hmm.
They're a bunch of influencers. And so it's like advertising for the cruise ship. So as we're walking around the cruise ship, there's people like hanging their cameras out and narrating stuff. And we're like, what the heck is going on? But it was a very, very sexually oriented boat. And I guess they used to have like a sex toy shop at one point, but they got rid of that because they didn't want to go too far that way. And they ended up hiring the CEO of Disney Cruises, who came over and started kind of dampening things down a little bit. And
that's a weird combination.
It's super weird. And so they weren't even going to have a casino on the boat because the Disney CEO was kind of against it. And so what happened was over time, they decided to put the casino on the boat. And that's actually how my wife and I got on, because I'm actually friends with one of the casino managers.
Okay.
So really probably the coolest cruise I've ever been on. And I've been on, almost 30 cruises. So it says a lot. In the room, everything was all controlled by a laptop, a little iPad type laptop thing, not laptop, tablet. Yeah. And so you would hit a button and it would close all your curtains. You could affect all your lights. You could change all your channels right on your tablet. And they had this one button called Get It On. And as soon as you hit the Get It On, all the curtains closed. It put on this like purplish hue light into the room. And then the TV started playing some boo, chaka, chaka, boom music. So it was hilarious, man. It was a cool
very,
experience.
Very Disney.
Yeah, very Disney. But the other cool thing about the Virgin Cruise Lines was their excursions that they chose were really interesting, in that they were almost an all-inclusive type excursion. So a lot of times we've been on cruises where you go do snorkeling or an ATV ride,
mm-hmm.
and they will take pictures and they'll try to sell you pictures at the end, or you'll have to rent shoes. Like if you have the wrong shoes on, they want you to have like aqua socks. You have to rent the aqua socks. You have to pay for lockers. There are extra charges on some of the excursions that you go on. And Virgin made sure to choose these vendors that actually had all of this as an all-inclusive type package, which was really, really, really cool.
Yeah.
So before we really get into this, what we're going to talk about today, I got to tell you, like, I had a real eye-opening experience because we did 2 excursions on the Virgin, and we actually went on the Royal right afterwards. So we had a long vacation. We did 2 cruises back to back, but one of our excursions was we were sliding down waterfalls and jumping off cliffs all the way down this mountain in the Dominican Republic, which was a really cool experience. And we had to sign a release that said, if a rock falls on your head, it's not our fault. If our equipment fails, it's not our fault. You can't sue us for anything. And I'm like, okay, that sucks, but we're on vacation. What the heck, you know? And so we taxi out to this place and we jump, do all this stuff, and we jump on our little bus and we taxi back. And I'm like, it's weird that we give so much trust to these third world countries, right? So then we decided to do the next excursion. And the next excursion we did was we went and swam with the sharks. And this isn't like a caged environment. This is out in the open ocean.
Yeah.
And we were under the impression we were going to swim with nurse sharks. So we signed all of our releases. If we get eaten by sharks, that it's our fault and we
Right.
can't sue. And so we go out there and I jump in the water. I'm the first one in the water and I'm out there swimming around and these sharks are coming up about a foot from your face and then they would turn and they would go somewhere else.
Hmm.
But I mean, freaked you out a little bit.
Sure.
But they're nurse sharks. I mean, what are they going to do?
Right.
They're
They're
going
just
to
checking you
gum
out.
you, right?
Right.
So I'm sitting there looking up at the boat and the whole boat, there's like 50 people down there just staring at me for like 4 or 5 minutes. And I'm like, what is going on? How come nobody's getting in the water?
Yeah.
And I start swimming around and then all of a sudden people start slowly getting in the water. And my wife's like the last one in. She's freaking out and she's cussing me out the whole time. And I finally get her in the water and she's like riding me like a surfboard. I can't even hardly swim. And we have no life vests on. We have nothing. We're just swimming around with these sharks.
Just out in the open ocean.
Yeah. So get back on the boat and all of the people that are running the show, they're like, okay, dummies, we're going to show you what you're swimming with. And they start throwing chum out in the water. And these sharks are like tearing it up, shark frenzy, like out of control, right?
Wow. Yeah.
So we find out that they're actually reef sharks. They weren't nurse sharks at all.
Gosh.
And so I start thinking again, I'm like, why? Why are we so stupid?
Why would you be so trusting?
Yeah, third world country. We're like, oh, we're on vacation. Nothing's going to happen. And I start thinking about everything that we do. Like even on our way to the trip, we jump in a bus in a third world country where they have no speed limits. They're passing people in, blind corners and everything. And we're not even wearing seat belts. We're just kicking back.
Right.
Like nothing in the world can happen to us. And you look around and everybody's the same way. Everybody's doing it, jumping on scooters and riding down roads, not even knowing the traffic laws. And I'm like, why are we so trusting of these other governments? Right. It's mind blowing to me to think about.
Yeah. It makes you really think about how coddled we are here in the US.
We
too.
are.
Yeah.
Yeah. But on the other end of that, it makes me wonder, we know everything that can happen out there, right? All these dangers that are out there in life, swimming with the shark. I mean, we could have easily gotten chewed up by something, right? But we trust them. And it makes me wonder why we're so trusting of our own government, right? Because we do. You just said we're coddled in the US, but how are we coddled? Like we just give all this trust and faith to our government that they're going to do what's best for us all the time.
Right. That trust is erring on the side of safety and caution rather than like putting ourselves into a position where our government can kill us with sharks.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you're erring on the side of caution. I figure trusting the government is not terrible when you talk about seatbelt laws and the understanding that you're swimming with biting sharks rather than nurse sharks.
Sure, but what are we trusting our government that we shouldn't be trusting them for? Which kind of leads me into what I know you really want to talk about today, and I actually want to talk about it because it's in the news, it's everywhere. There's actually 2 events that happened almost back to back, and they happened just as I got back from my vacation. And unfortunately, we didn't have an opportunity to talk about it last week.
Right. This is the first time we got together.
Yeah. But what I'm talking about is 2 different incidences. There was a shooting in Buffalo. I believe it's Buffalo, correct?
Yes.
And then the Texas school shooting. Both just tragic and disgusting things that happened in our country. And again, we talk about our government. And I talk about trusting our government to protect us, but then these type of situations continue to happen over and over and over again. So maybe we shouldn't be trusting them as much as we think. I don't know, but I'm going to throw it over to you for a few minutes because I know you have a lot to say about where we're going with this.
I do, and most of it's just reactionary. Like I wonder about your stance on a few things, but to kind of anchor into what you were saying. Yeah, we trust our government. When you look at the response in the Texas shooting and you see 19 officers stacked in a hallway waiting to enter for 78 minutes, they give this gunman time in a classroom murdering kids. It makes you wonder how much trust you can really have in your government. I mean, these officers are dressed like military personnel, but they're not trained like it. They're trained from a perspective of self-preservation and defensiveness rather than from they don't have combat training. They look like they do. They're dressed like they do, but now we know those are just costumes that they wear, right? That's meant to just terrify the public into doing what they want us to do.
And the deeper you dig into that whole situation, the more disgusted you are with the police force and their actions.
With the false information that they gave out the first day and the second day and the third day. Before
they were arresting parents. They were tasing parents trying to get into the schools. Like,
right.
Are you kidding me? If that was me, I would have been running in unarmed. I would have had a baseball, whatever I could to try to save my child.
Right. Pick up a rock on the way in.
Yeah, but to tase them or arrest them while you're sitting by doing nothing, it's really like a bad.
But there were cops who were going to get their own kids out.
Yeah,
they went in to do that.
Are you talking about the border patrol guys or actual cops?
No, there were cops who went in to get their own children. So they were arresting or detaining, not arresting, but detaining parents at the fence line, keeping them out of the school. There was one woman who was handcuffed, and then by border patrol or by someone, I believe, by some other agency.
Yeah.
And then she went to talk to a person that she knew on the police force, and he let her out of the cuffs. And then she jumped the fence and went and got her own children out. There were policemen who were going to get their own children out when they were in the process of detaining parents from doing the same. So, like, every aspect of this is just sickening.
Yeah. And, like I saw interviews where the cops were trying to defend their actions as much as possible, saying that it's our policy. I mean, we don't want to send our officers in to get killed. All they're going to do is create more death and havoc. And we wanted the professionals to be there. We wanted our SWAT team. In all honesty, I think the police could have spun it a little bit differently. And I'm going to be devil's advocate for you for just a second, because I don't necessarily 100% believe what I'm about to say, but I know that there's some truth to it. We know that the police force has been through a lot over the last year. They've been held accountable for all kinds of things. They've watched cities burn down. Now there's laws about they've watched their own be arrested and thrown in prison for the George Floyd situation. There's other situations. I mean, they're on the camera like nonstop right now. And so this self-preservation mode, like, I can almost understand it. They don't want to run in and something happen and then all of a sudden they're going to prison for whatever happened. Although I think the situation doesn't really account for that at all. Like, it's a completely different situation, right. But I can almost understand the way the cops are feeling about this. But when they start arresting parents, like, you're right. I mean, that's indefensible.
It is. And for them to be stacked up out in the hallway for 78 minutes without going in to stop the shooter, their job, you mentioned that some of them said that was their process, or that's the protocol.
Yeah, I don't know if they were old protocols or if
it is.
Yeah, I'm not sure. Like, this is a small city in Texas, from what I understand. And so I don't know what their particular protocols were, but the interviews that I was hearing weren't necessarily from Texas. These are other people. I mean, it's easy for us to armchair quarterback anything, right? We weren't there. We don't know exactly what was going on. We don't know what thinking or what processes were going on. And unfortunately, we can't even believe what they're telling us at this point. So, but I know that it was either an old process or an old way of thinking, or this is still their process at this point in that little area in Texas where they wait for the professionals to come in.
Right. So there's the president from the school safety advocacy group who goes around and trains schools and trains officers in local area, like trains local officers on how to engage with school shooters, says that this thinking was from 20, 30 years ago. This is not the active shooter training that they go through. And Texas Governor Greg Abbott just raised the amount of money for the training for this kind of scenario. They raised it by $600 million. That's over $500 million was allotted to different schools to raise their safety and do the training that they needed to.
How long ago was that? Roughly.
I'm over the
6 months ago.
Over the last couple of years.
Okay.
Yeah.
So the money's potentially not making it.
The money's there.
It's potentially not making it to the schools for that purpose, is what it sounds like.
And I don't know the exact time frame that the money was allocated for this and what they've done, but that was his excuse. That he said, well, we've allocated $600 million and it did nothing, right? And he's still talking about hardening the schools. But you have officers, what they need to do and what their policy is with this. And, I trained for active shooters when I was working at the prison, and it was the same kind of thing. Like, you take what you've got, you go in and you stop the threat. And if you have 5 officers, then you just line up and you start taking shots. And if 4 of you make it, the 5th one got him. If all 5 don't make it, there's more on the way. Like that, when you're in a school shooting situation, you become the target so that you can take the rounds instead of the children taking the rounds.
Yeah.
You took that job for a reason. And if you're not willing to do that job, then don't do it. Get someone else to do it. They had hundreds of officers there during that day. Some of them would have lined up and gone in.
Yeah. Right. Well, I mean, there's so many things that were lied about
they're
initially.
They're waiting for marksmen. They're waiting for, all this gear and equipment when all they needed was somebody to make the decision to go. And that's what the Border Patrol, who went in and wound up taking him out, they were actually called back. They were told not to go in yet.
Yeah,
and
he was apparently, he was at a barber and his wife sent him a text message, from what I understand.
Yeah.
And the barber, his wife sent him a text message that there was an active shooter, come help. And the barber actually gave him a gun, and he rounded up a couple of his buddies, and they went in against
the orders.
Against the orders.
Yeah.
And he ended up shooting the gunman. One of his partners was shot, and one was received a shrapnel wound. So thank God for people like that. I mean, parents would have done the same thing, trying to protect
give any of those parents outside a gun and they would have gone in to do the same thing.
Yeah, I would have.
If I don't make it, the gun is laying there. Somebody else pick it up and try.
Yeah, my wife or my kids, either one, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just, there's so much to say about, like, how could we have prevented this, and I hate that our politicians are grabbing onto this for political motivations right now with the gun laws. And, if the laws were better, but you read about it, the kid bought the guns legally. He didn't have any red flags against him mentally to where he would have been, banned from buying the gun.
No, not in an official space. So
what could we have done better to prevent this? And I hear a lot of people, I listen to the Daily Wire. And so I hear a lot of things from them as far as what they could have done to prevent it. Ben Shapiro always talks about how people will protect their money more than they'll protect their children. And there's a little bit of truth to that, right? We have armed people at banks protecting money, but at our schools where we don't want to put anything in place to protect our children. And that gunman walked in unopposed. They said he was outside shooting for like 12 minutes is when the first 911 call came in and reported that he was shooting outside.
Right, but they have a resource officer who is armed at that location. They just weren't there.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. And that's his whole point, is why wasn't there an armed person there to help try to prevent this? And if there was, why are we not hearing that story? Why wasn't he?
After how many minutes?
Or she?
After how many minutes there were hundreds of officers with guns outside. There was 19
waiting
in the hallway.
Yeah. Waiting. Well, it was well over 12 minutes.
How many good guys with guns do you need?
Yeah, it was well over 12 minutes.
How many good guys with guns do you need before you make the realization that it does not work?
Well,
a good guy with a gun does not always stop a bad guy with a gun.
It doesn't.
There were 19 out there and they waited 78 minutes.
Yeah. And we don't know how many kids died waiting that 78 minutes that we probably could have saved.
Right. How many bled out?
Yeah.
So to kind of counter Ben Shapiro's argument, I think that's a childish argument to say that you just need a good guy with a gun there.
Well,
are you going to put one in every classroom?
That's not necessarily what he's saying. But basically what Ben Shapiro is saying, I agree with him strongly, actually, is there's no reason that there should be more than one entry into the school. There's no reason. There can
And
be
there
multiple
wasn't.
entries out.
Right.
The kid walked into the back door.
Right, because
Unopposed.
because there was a car accident, which was his truck. The teacher went and propped the door open because she went to grab her cell phone to call 911 because of the accident.
Should have never happened.
It never should have happened, but there's always going to be a human error. There's not even a door handle on the outside of that back door. It's not an entrance.
I don't know all of that stuff.
I'm just saying that how many exits do you need before one becomes an entrance?
You're right. But I agree with him. There should only be one. There should be automatic locks.
And that's how it is.
Teachers
in
need
most
to know
schools.
that they're not allowed to prop doors open. They shouldn't be.
Sure.
And that's what
Even
he's
if you
saying.
think you're going to administer life-saving care, you should not prop that door open.
And that's what
we
he's
know
saying.
that now.
And that's what he's saying. That's what he's been preaching that for a long time.
Right, there's going to be all these microscopic points of hindsight that we're going to be looking back on in every instance when really the problem is the guns.
I don't know.
It's a person with a gun in every time.
I don't think
there's
it's the
a killing.
guns. I think it's the mental. It's the mental state of the people. We've had guns for how many years?
We've had mental problems for how many years? He was a nut with a gun.
Exactly.
He wasn't just a nut.
But how do we correct that? And I don't know what the answer is.
Raise the age to 21 or 25. I'd be cool with either.
Well, here's the problem. When you start allowing, and I know this is
because
the
39
issue.
of the last 62 school shootings have been someone between the ages of 17 and 19, right? Under the age of 21. 39 of the last 62 shootings have been someone under the age of 21. How many of those could have been prevented if the age to purchase the firearms was 21? Maybe 39, maybe none.
Probably none.
But
we don't know.
We do know that this kid wouldn't have had them if the age to purchase the guns was above 18.
Well, we have so many guns.
He waited until he was 18.
We have so many guns. He could have gotten them on the black market. I mean, we don't know. Like you said,
he wanted them when he was 17. He asked his sister to help him buy the firearms, and she wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
I think you should have to have character references. I think just like you do when you're getting a job.
Hey, I'm not opposed to any common sense gun laws.
Sure.
But here's
and I'm not
the problem
saying
that we run into.
I'm not saying take the guns overall. I'm saying raise the age.
Here's the problem that we run into. And this is a fear that I think is amongst any gun supporter is I don't think a lot of them are opposed to common sense gun laws. I really don't. But the problem is we have a government with a history of taking a little more, and they'll try to micro this. So, for example, this kid is 19 years old?
18.
18 years old. Got a hold of a gun, went in, had a school massacre. Okay, we're going to raise the age of the guns to 21. Now we have the next person come in. They start a gun, they start a massacre. With whatever they get a hold of, it doesn't matter even what their age is. Now all of a sudden we have to create another law, and then we have to create another law, and it starts all heading to a place where we start taking people's rights away, and that's what people are concerned about that are gun owners.
Well,
I mean, we really don't have a lot of freedoms in our country. We think we do.
We don't even have the freedom to abort a baby anymore after Roe versus Wade is overturned.
we could get
how
into
many
that
times?
too,
how many rights are being taken away from us?
But you do have a right to have your baby terminated, and we can get into that one later.
We will get into that one on another podcast. But all I'm saying is the Republicans, conservatives have no problem legislating with their ideologies until it comes to guns. And they're still legislating with their ideologies. It's the NRA giving Mitt Romney almost $14 million, right?
Yes. But we talk about this like it's an easy topic to get into, and it's not. These are things that have been debated for years and years. So, for example, we have red flag laws in place right now. We do. California, I believe, has one, and Florida actually has one, where if you feel somebody is a concern or they may be a threat to other people, you can report them and then they can lose their gun rights. Mm-hmm. The problem is now all of a sudden, Jeff, you know what? I'm mad at you. So I can call and have your guns taken away.
Well, there needs to be justification.
There has to be. And these people can go to court and they can have it reversed, but now they're out $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 in legal fees.
I don't even think it
that.
would cost that much to defend yourself against someone who's
but
just
that's what
angry
it's costing. That's what it's costing people. And I mean, there's studies.
And what is the cost in Uvalde, Texas right now?
Oh, it's huge.
It's huge.
It's huge.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of reasons why.
You talk about protecting money over protecting children as if it's a bad thing.
No,
so it is a bad thing.
I don't think it's bad to be protecting money. I don't think it's bad to be protecting children, but you're right. Children should be the priority for sure. They should be the priority.
And they're not right now if we allow 18-year-old kids to go buy firearms.
Yes. But what do we do? And I mean, you can get a gun at 16 to go hunting. Do you raise that age up too for people?
To get a semi-automatic rifle, I think you should raise the age. He couldn't buy a pistol.
Sure.
Because he's not old enough.
Yeah, 21, I think, is a pistol.
And so he didn't buy the pistol. He bought AR-15s because those are the ones that he could. And he bought them, 2 weeks after his 18th birthday?
Okay, so
even
now...
though his sister wouldn't help him.
You can't own a semi-automatic until you're 21. But now we have these 18-year-olds in the military. So now what do we do here? Now we're creating two separate laws.
I understand. They can sign up for the military and they can't go get a beer.
Yeah.
I get it.
They get a beer.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then they're going to get the guns too. I mean, because we need people to protect our country. But
you're not going to have that many 18-year-olds go and break the law when they've never broken a law before to go buy a gun and shoot up a school.
Yeah. It's hard to know right now. This world is like upside down. I mean, I can't fathom what would be going on in that kid's head to think it's okay to go. I know he was tormented for a lisp is what I was reading about.
He had a stutter and a lisp.
Yes.
His grandparents, there were domestic violence charges. The police were at his house every week. He was cutting his face because he thought it looked cool. He was killing cats and throwing them into people's houses.
And nobody reported him.
And bragging about it to a girl that he was texting. This kid should not have had a gun.
No, but I mean, how do you prevent that if nobody's reporting it?
Raise the age. Give it more time for someone to report it. They called him school shooter as a nickname, as a joke, right? Well, while they were bullying him, they called him school shooter.
But didn't we have the 17-year-olds at what was it, Parker or
Parkland?
Yeah, weren't they the 17-year-olds? I think they were the 17-year-old kids. One of the big school shootings where they were 17. I mean,
yeah, I know. There was a 17-year-old and a 19-year-old in Columbine.
If people want to create these atrocities, they're going to find a way to do it. But you're right. We shouldn't make it easier for them to do. Right. I understand that piece. But again, now we got to really balance the fact that if we allow people the opportunity to take rights away, then they're going to continue to take rights away. And then pretty soon they're going to say, you need to be 25 to own a gun. And then 30, which I'm old enough that doesn't affect me. So I'm not opposed to it.
And it doesn't matter if it affects me or not. It's whether or not it's the right thing to do. And I think when the human brain isn't fully developed until the age of 25 or 26, when they really start to understand and comprehend long-term consequences. So do you make 21 just an adult now? Or is 25 just an adult now? Do you raise the age of adulthood in general so that we can protect these kids? This isn't I'm going to go down. I'm going to just read a few things.
Okay.
Real quick. In Oklahoma.
Just so you know, before you even start, I'm not completely opposed to all this stuff. What I'm really concerned about and what I read other people are concerned about is when you start allowing certain laws to take guns away, where does it stop? And that's a fear that Americans have. And that's why this becomes a really difficult topic.
The only reason that fear is in place is because the NRA is stoking those fears.
Yes. And we have politicians.
They are paying politicians millions of dollars in campaign contributions.
The NRA
and
is
in cash.
bankrupt.
They're
the NRA
bankrupt,
is completely shut down.
$14 million to Mitt Romney, and he was just the top earner. You get the top 10 people, and I think they all got over $1 million in campaign contributions from the NRA to their super PACs.
Then there's your problem right there.
The NRA is buying our politicians.
Not even
the problem.
The fact that our politicians are being bought is the problem. Nobody should be able to buy our politicians.
No, but they do.
These people should be stuck on their income. They should not be able to earn a penny for the first 10 years they're out of office.
I'm fully on board.
Yeah, I mean, that is the number one problem. If we're going to fix anything, that's the number one problem to fix. Then these people have to actually do it for the passion of doing it, and they know they're not going to be rich until, they'll still probably get earnings later on, but that's what I'm saying. Give them a 10-year reprieve after they're out of office before they can start earning these large amounts of money.
But these are campaign contributions to their super PACs. You need to stop that.
All that.
All of that is a big problem right now. But in the meantime, you've got to deal with the firearms. Politicians are not going to vote for something where they can't make money.
That's right. But the thing is,
we need to start voting out anyone who's accepting money. We need to start voting out whoever is not going to be in the position of putting forth common sense gun. And I'm a Second Amendment advocate.
I know.
I own firearms. I like my firearms. When I was working at the prison, you get 172 inmates in one pod. You have 2 pods per unit. So you have 2 officers in a pod with 172 inmates per pod. They're just out in the day room. They're loose. They're hanging out. They're behind the officer station. Like, it's just you and these dudes to your back when they're using the phone, right? They're all around you. You go out to the rec center, and when you work in recreation, you have up to 300 inmates in the baseball yard where they have horseshoes. They have, aluminum baseball bats. You're alone out there with 300 inmates. And then they'll call in a second officer if there's more than 300 because it's a nice day or whatever. So you have to trust your porters, the guys, the inmates who are hired to manage the equipment. And so when I was working there, you tend to look these guys up and you see how much trust can I allow. It's no trust that you can allow, but how much trust do I have to place on this guy who's counting all the equipment to make sure everything's turned in, who's not going to beat me with a baseball bat when we get, through the door of the gym and it's just me and this porter. So you look these dudes up, and when I was looking people up and I saw that it would take 2 men with screwdrivers and electrical cords to take over a family of 4 and rape and murder all of them because there was no gun in the hands of the good guy. Like, I understand the need for guns. When you look at the guy who crawled through the window of a 12-year-old girl and raped her at knife point while her parents slept in the room next door. Like, I understand the desire and the need for a gun in the house. That's when I started buying my firearms. I bought them when Obama was elected because I knew the price would jack up and I could resell them at a profit, which I did. I sold for double. Twice I did that because of the gun scares from the Republicans. But like, I don't want anyone to think that I'm not pro-gun.
Yeah.
I'm pro-gun. I'm pro-common sense gun reform, and I'm anti-NRA because of their stance on this.
I'm having a hard time with the political the outreach that's going on right now, and it's completely on the opposite side. I know you have a lot to say against the Republican Party, and I think they're just as much to blame as the Democratic Party right now. But for some reason, we allow them to tear us apart. There's no reason. Like, I'm hearing Democratic people saying that we need to do these gun laws and vote on them because our Republicans like killing babies. They like killing people. That's not appropriate at all, because I don't believe that's true in any way. I don't think anybody wants these kids shot and killed.
Right.
Same thing with abortion. I'll just touch on it for a second. I don't think that Republicans should be calling the Democrats baby killers because the Democratic Party tends to favor abortion over the Republican Party. I don't believe that that's appropriate either, because I don't think anybody is out there that believes that the other people want to kill babies or kill children. I just don't think people are that evil. When it comes to the abortion, I understand that the ideology of when people determine when a child is a baby, that's a different argument completely. But it doesn't help if a Republican's out there calling them baby killers just because they're trying to get an emotional response.
Sure.
Same thing in this shooting. I'm hearing the Democrats calling the Republicans child killers and child murderers because they're not passing the reforms that the Democratic Party wants to pass. There's reasons. I mean, this is a deep argument and a deep conversation.
The only reasons are financial. The only reason is so the NRA can sell more guns.
I don't believe that.
They can sell more guns for the companies who bolster this organization. You say they're bankrupt, but they do make money on selling firearms for them. And when you have people saying when you have a bad guy with a gun, you need a good guy with a gun. Well, what happens? Everybody has a gun. That's gun sales. That's all that is.
Sure.
This is nothing more than financial for them.
Well, here.
And
let
so
me go
it's
back
hard
to
to say that the Republicans don't have blood on their hands when they're accepting so much money on campaign contributions and in just cash.
I don't agree with any of it. You know that.
I know that.
Like,
but
I think that's the most disgusting thing on the planet. I think that's why we're selling our country away, is because these people are making money.
Right.
All the
I
way
just
up
need
to
to
our
put it out
president.
there is all.
Yeah, but let's go back real quick to the red flag law, and I'll tell you another concern that is out there. And so the other concern, like with the red flag law that I'm reading about, is self-reporting, right? Say say something traumatic happens to somebody in my family,
Mm-hmm.
right? All of a sudden, I'm like devastated. I lose my father. I lose my mother,
Mm-hmm.
my wife, God forbid, my daughter, any of that stuff.
Sure.
All of a sudden, I'm depressed. I mean, that's going to happen.
Right.
So now I go into the doctor and I'm like, hey, I need something. I'm having a really hard time. This happened. I'm going through this really traumatic time in my life. I'm depressed.
Mm-hmm.
Well, now all of a sudden you lose all your rights to own a gun. And maybe temporarily you should. Maybe that's something that should happen, but it never gets reversed. And if it does get reversed, it costs a lot of money to get it reversed. And so what's happening is people they have an aversion to reporting this stuff. I just talked to somebody yesterday, actually, whose father goes into the doctor and they ask him questions. And he said, I will never answer this honestly because they can send somebody over to my house to take my guns away.
That's
if
more
they don't
difficult
like
than you might think.
Well, yes and no. I've read a lot about it this morning. You're right. It's hard to really hold it. It says that judges reverse over a third of these situations. So it's hard to make it stick. But to have it happen initially is not so hard. They could send somebody over. Oh, you're a danger. We need to take your guns away. It's easy to get that initial order.
Sure.
It's having it reversed is not difficult either, but that's where it starts to cost a lot of money in order for you to defend yourself and to, present your case to the judge. And so that becomes an issue. And like I said, I know this is deep, 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 deep. And I'm on board with you with common sense gun laws. The problem
But
is
you're not, because you say it's a slippery slope.
It
which
is a
logical
slippery slope.
fallacy.
It is a slippery
Which is
slope.
a logical fallacy that you can't really.
Well, the logical fallacy is that you and I believe in logical gun control being, logical.
I disagree.
And we're going to both be in a different area of where logical gun control is going to be. I don't know exactly where I would fall in line. I would be okay with you not being able to buy an AR or a pistol until you're 21 years old. That wouldn't bother me one bit.
Sure.
I don't have a problem with that. I think that makes sense. Especially since ARs tend to be used most in a lot of these massacres as of late.
Yeah, those guns are for hunting feral pigs and hunting people.
Well, they're easy to modify for people,
they're
and that's the
varmint
problem.
guns. Even if they're not modified, I'm pretty well trained in the AR-15 through working for the prison, and I can squeeze off some pretty accurate rounds, like more than one a second.
Sure.
With an AR.
Sure.
And it doesn't take a lot of accuracy to be a school shooter and take out as many people like in the same 30 seconds.
Sure. And it wouldn't be hard to put on a question. What is your reasoning for wanting an AR, and ask them to justify it and maybe have an overview saying, I just want an AR for home protection. Okay. Why do you think you need home protection? Like, we don't go deeper into these people's psyche, right? So we don't really know. So I think that would be a good common sense thing with any gun. Why do you think you need this? I need it for hunting. Okay, what kind of animals do you hunt? Just ask that extra question, because that's where people may struggle a little bit.
And I don't think that would be that beneficial.
Sure. What about
anybody
an AR,
can
right?
answer anything.
You're right.
You could say you want it for self-defense. That's fine.
So why do you think you need it for self-defense? That's the follow-up question that I'm saying.
Sure.
Because if somebody says, I feel threatened by, now all of a sudden we've got an issue that we need to look into.
Right. And
regardless.
it's not even a good weapon for self-defense. If you're talking about being in your home, it's going to go through a wall and kill your neighbor. It's going to go through a wall and take out somebody who's on the other side in your living room.
There's always going to be bad actors. Like, you're right. People can lie about anything. And I get that piece too, Jeff. But the thing is that might be something that would be a common sense thing to put into place, because now we can engage into why. Like, why do you think you need this? Why do you think you need that? And make people answer it, right? Self-defense. That's not a good enough answer. I want you to elaborate. We have a ton of AI that monitors everything right now. It would be able to pick up on some other red flags. And I mean, the thing is as we build our database, we're going to be able to pick people out like that 18-year-old a lot easier and a lot easier.
I mean, you're scared to raise the age to 21 because you think other laws are going to come in place. Like,
I'm not.
What are the chances you're going to write an essay to get your firearm? Like, there's not going to be any legislation to make that happen.
But that's the thing is if we're going to make laws, we need to make laws that are going to not take people's rights away, necessarily until it needs to be taken away, but we need to really get into the mind of people. I mean, everybody. So back in the 70s, there was that team that went in with the serial killers to try to understand why these serial killers are killing. And they started finding and putting things together to where they can almost pick out the sociological issues and mindset of these people.
Right, like
they
predetermining factors to predict.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And some of it isn't necessarily to find out who the serial killer is before the serial killer, but it's to be able to confirm that the person that they have is exhibiting some of these same symptoms,
Sure.
right? And so why not start building a database that way? We are amazing. As humans, we are amazing on our ability to be able to distinguish certain things. And we would, I mean, no matter how much you want to lie about something, people are going to be consistent. If I want to go shoot up a school, then I'm going to put certain things out there in my psyche. My answers are going to be probably pretty close to somebody else that's pretty messed up, right? Because we're not really that different. We're going to find similarities in some of these things. So maybe that would be an idea of how to do a common sense type of gun law, a portion of it. It's not everything.
I wouldn't want to go too far down that path, but there was a 15-year-old girl who was doing shopping online, and just the things that she was looking at, Target predicted that she was pregnant. They started sending flyers to the house, to her home, trying to sell her things for babies. And the father called the marketing or called the store and was all upset because they were trying to market to her as if she was pregnant. Well, it turned out she was pregnant. And so Target knew before the father that this 15-year-old girl was pregnant.
So that just confirms exactly what I'm telling you.
They are very good at predicting this kind of a thing. There should be no reason for them to have social media monitoring in place to try to predict some of this behavior.
Exactly. And I don't have a problem with that. I think that would be common sense.
But a lot of people would have a problem with that.
There's people that would, because they fear that they're going to lose other rights as a result of this. Or if I said something wrong, I'm pissed off at my neighbor. So, I'm going to say something bad about my neighbor on social media, and all of a sudden I get tagged.
Right. Because you're going to have like mostly conservatives too, talking about, Trump was banned from Twitter. Mm-hmm. How easy is it going to be for that to have real world consequences when they start banning people from owning firearms because of social media posts?
You're right. And there's no perfect answer. So I get that piece too. There's no perfect answer.
No, there's not. But the one common denominator that happens in every mass shooting is a gun. Yeah. And so we need to get the guns out of the hands of people who should not have them. And most of the time with school shootings, it's someone between the ages of 17 and 21. So if we raise the age, it's going to take out some from that pool.
One of the things I think is really interesting with our conversations that we have is we are so far apart on a lot of our ideas. Mm-hmm. But as we talk, we can kind of get closer to a middle understanding, even though we're never going to understand the other person's side. We need some of that in our political offices as well, and we don't at all. It's so weird to me how we have 50 senators, Republicans, and 50 senator Democrats, and it's like they all work as one unit. They don't. Right. They're not independent in any way. They're not independent thinkers.
Right.
And so
it's news when one of them, when a handful of them, 5 of them break party lines to vote for a bill that the rest of the Republicans or the rest of the Democrats didn't vote for. And that's news, national news.
Not only is it news, but the news comes out and says, for example, Manchin, we'll use him because he's been in the news a lot. Mm-hmm. Manchin broke from Democratic Party lines. His term in office is going to be shortened because of this.
Right.
So not only is it news, but they start pushing them out so that they can pull somebody else in so that whole unit can be even stronger as one unit. And this has probably been going on a long time, way before I was in politics.
It happened very recently with baby food. And it's bad enough when it's gas prices and baby formula, but you throw in 19 dead children and some dead teachers and a dead grandmother, and you really start looking at the real world consequences for this.
Yeah. So I took you way off topic. I apologize. I want to pull you back in to where we were. Mm-hmm. You were going to read something to me. And so I want to pull it back to that place.
Sure.
I kind of pulled you off topic because you were pretty you're pretty amplified, and I wanted to kind of calm the situation down a little bit so that we could get into this, because I really want to understand what you're getting ready to read.
I'm just going to get reanimated.
No, it's totally okay, but we don't want to go there when we're at a 10. We want to come down to at least a 5
and
or
that's
6.
fine. But so in Oklahoma, 1 person was killed and 7 people were wounded at a Memorial Day festival. In Tennessee, 6 people were injured during an exchange of gunfire in a riverfront neighborhood. In Michigan, there were 3 children and 1 woman fatally shot in a home with another man who received gunshot wound to the head. 6 people were injured, including several teenagers at a graduation party in Alabama. Pennsylvania, 4 people were shot, including 2 teenagers while on the way to a prom. And then you get to Texas at the Robb Elementary shooting. All of these shootings have taken place since the Robb Elementary shooting. There have been...
They took place before or
since?
Okay, these were after.
Yeah, in the last 7 days, there have been 10 of these mass shootings. Right,
so,
that's any shooting where more than 3 people are victimized by the gunfire.
Okay, and we don't know if these were all related, or we don't know if it was gang violence. I mean, I know it doesn't even really matter to you.
No, it doesn't at all,
because it's a gun issue. But
it's kid. A lot of them are kids at parties and on the way to prom getting shot. And like, why do these kids have firearms? Whether they're legal or not legal, when they get the firearm, how are they getting the firearms? And you've got a lot to choose from. How many of these? Last I heard, there was 212 shootings so far this year, mass shootings. How many of these could have been prevented? Like, more mass shootings than we've had days in the year so far. How many of these could have been prevented by raising the age?
Is this higher than normal? Do you know?
This is normal.
This is normal. This is every year since
this is
19.
No, this is, I mean, it's increasing. It's increasing every year. You get copycats. People see this stuff. How many fucking incels are sitting in their mom's basement reading about this gunman who took out all these kids, and he thinks that's what I want to do.
I want a name.
I want a name.
I want to be all over the news.
Yeah. I mean, copycat crimes are a real thing.
That's one thing that the Daily Wire refuses to announce the names, because they said that there's a study that shows that 25% of the mass shooters, that's why they do it, is because they see this and they want to build themselves up.
So you get 25% more this year, 25% more next year.
Yeah. It's really sad. You know, we have 300 million people in the United States, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe 400 million by now. We're talking such a small percentage, and it doesn't take much. It takes one crazy person.
Right.
And I mean, what is that? Percentage wise, we're talking, a millionth of a percent. And the problem is we're never going to be able to stop all of them.
Guns are responsible for more child deaths than anything else. This year, we surpassed car accidents as the leading cause for child death.
But I think that becomes the argument as well, because it's not the guns, it's the people getting a hold of the guns. But how do you stop that?
It is. And look at every other society in the world, they've got the same mental problems we do. They've got the same video games, the same media, the same everything, and they don't have the mass shootings that we have in the United States. The only difference between us and them is the amount of guns we have.
So we would have to look and see how their mental healths are coming out. You're right. I mean, the guns are a big factor in what's going on, but it's not the guns. It's the people that are getting a hold of them.
And it's people like
who we need to stop.
People like Abbott who blame mental problems for shootings, but they keep voting down measures that would improve mental health care.
I don't know.
So you start getting into...
I don't know what they're voting down, and I don't know what rights they're stepping on.
He cut $200 million in
Greg Abbott is Texas
governor. Yeah. Mm-hmm. And he cut $200 million for mental health care in his state.
Well, it makes it hard when we start judging people for those type of things, because we don't know what the rationale is behind it. And if he has a good rationale, which I can't even think of what would be a good rationale.
What's the good rationale for cutting mental health care?
Pelosi's husband's getting a big portion of that money because he's in. I mean, we don't know what's going on underground, which brings me all the way back to what I started this whole conversation with. We give so much trust to our government, But why are we giving them so much trust when they play these games with us?
Right.
And that's exactly what it is. It's a political game to keep them in power. I don't care if it's Abbott. I don't care if it's Pelosi. I don't care if it's Biden, if it's Trump. I don't care if it's any of them. They're all playing the same game, and it's all about keeping them in power.
But you can't look at their games and think, well, I guess we shouldn't do anything then.
You're right.
You can't. You have to take action when you've got 10 mass shootings in the last 7 days, and only 2 of them made national news.
Yeah. Well, I can't really comment on those mass shootings because I don't know if it was a family member that was causing it.
Does it matter?
It does to me, as far as when we're trying to make laws for guns.
And mass shootings isn't even the biggest problem in the United States. It's suicide with guns, which
You're
is
right.
62% of our killings with firearms are done with suicide.
Sure.
And you talk about self-reporting. A very close relative to me checked himself into a hospital because he was having thoughts of harming himself. He called the police on himself. They came and they took his firearm. He had a .22 rifle. They came and took that to the sheriff's office. He went in for observation, and because he was self-reporting, he didn't like how he was being treated, and so he checked himself out. On his way home, he stopped at the sheriff's office and he picked up his firearm. Less than a week later, he was gone through that means, right? I understand the devastation that can be had through suicide with firearms. This is not an easy problem to solve, but it is an easy problem to affect. And if this kid didn't have these AR-15s, there would be 22 people still alive. And that's all there is to it. It doesn't matter. Like, you look at the countries that are very much like our own, and they have socialized medicine where you can get mental health care when you have a problem like this. And you're not just locked up in some hospital basement for observation for 72 hours and then they cut you loose. That's what our mental health care is like these days.
Yeah. Well, maybe you're onto something there. Maybe that's a solution.
And another
maybe
solution,
we make mental health free for everybody. Maybe that's a big start.
I think all healthcare, but especially mental health care, should be free for everybody.
Sure. And there shouldn't be consequences to people for checking themselves in.
But
they shouldn't lose rights for the rest of their life. I mean,
but you're breaking party lines. You're breaking party lines by saying that we should have free mental health care for everybody.
But I'm not on the party. I don't.
You're a
claim.
conservative,
right? But I don't really. I mean,
just like I'm not a Democrat, but if I say some things that are not in line with the Democratic Party,
they're going to kick you over somewhere.
It's going to seem like I'm breaking party lines.
Yeah,
that's all I mean.
It's like that show Divergent, where you don't fit into any sect, so you got your own little place over here in the dumps, in the slums. That's
yeah, right.
No, I get it, but I mean, if we have consequences for people that check themselves in for mental health, that's a reason for them not to check themselves in. So maybe we get rid of the consequences right away.
There was no consequence for him.
Then they can be effectively evaluated to see if that consequence is appropriate for that person. But then we need more training for some of our healthcare professionals because we're short on that as well. And see, these are the common sense things that I could get behind and I could understand and I can agree with. I don't like the fact that we make laws so easy. I was thinking about this just the other day. There was a game we used to play when we were kids. I don't know that you did, but I liked to drink when I was younger, liked to party. And we would play this drinking game called the thumb game. Mm-hmm. And it started out where we're all sitting around the table and there was one person that was in control. And as soon as they put their thumb on the table, everybody had to put their thumb on the table. The last person to do it had to drink. Mm-hmm. That last person that had to drink now became the person in charge, and they would pick something that they would do that everybody else had to follow. And the thumb guy still was the thumb guy, but the other people now had to pay attention to the thumb guy and the other guy that were making the rules.
Okay.
And it worked its way around until you had so many rules in place that you were constantly drinking for one reason or another, and you couldn't keep up on all the laws that were in place. Mm-hmm. And I feel like that's where we are in our civilization. We have too much government, too many laws, and I understand these laws are there to protect us. Like, I totally get it, and I know there's reasons behind every single law that's out there, and crazy law. There's really bizarre laws, and I understand that there's reasons behind that, but we need to be a little more realistic with some of the things that we're doing.
But
And
you're
when we
asking-
create a law against a gun to where we're like, hey, you have a problem, we're going to take all your gun rights away. Now, all of a sudden, that's a consequence that people aren't going to want to follow, right? But if we say, hey, Jeff, you know, you went through a traumatic time, you had a traumatic experience. Now we're going to take your guns away for a year, and then we're going to give you free legal counsel so you can present your case in a year to a judge to get your guns back. That's not a consequence. That's not one that people would be completely opposed to, right? Because at that point you can say, you're right, I went through a lot. You know, what I saw was really disturbing. I think that's appropriate. Let's go ahead and do that. You're not out of any money. They're protecting the community, right? Because they're getting the gun out of your hand while you go through this, and you get a chance to go in and get evaluated and get the care you need so you don't become a danger. It's still not going to...
And it sounds good, but it'll never be approved because of cost. It'll never be approved because the NRA is backing so many of these congressmen.
And we have $44 billion going out to a war that we're not even a part of. And that's just a part of what we're sending out to, 300 plus countries that we send money to.
Right.
So.
But what I think is funny is that we were talking about party lines and how so many Republicans won't break, or so many Democrats won't break party lines. And when they do, it's newsworthy. Republicans are not pro-gun, no matter how you look at it. You got Nixon, who said he would remove every gun from every house, but that would be political suicide. Reagan, he signed an executive order to make it illegal to carry firearms on trains and in national parks. You've got George Bush Sr., and he put through a ban on semi-automatic weapons that were being imported from other countries. Clinton went through and expanded on that ban and just banned all semi-automatics. But then that expired under George H.W. Bush. And he said, if this bill made it back across my desk, I would sign it. He urged Congress to put it back on his desk so he could sign it to ban this style of weapon again. Right? You got Trump, who banned the bump stocks, and he was talking to reporters and he said, yeah, I'm for common sense gun reform. I'm for universal background checks. But then when he was talking to the NRA, he was saying something entirely different. The only person who expanded gun rights since Nixon was Obama. Obama signed an executive order that reversed Reagan's order, and now we're allowed to carry on trains and in national parks. So you look at all those presidents, and there's only one who had any type of expansion on gun rights, and it was Obama. The person that everybody was making into the boogeyman, was terrified was going to take our firearms, when every Republican in that list wanted to get rid of them completely. So you're playing party politics, but you have no fucking idea what you're talking about. Not you. You have no idea what you're talking about, because these people are motivated by the dollar. They're not motivated by what they believe.
But you're talking also, when you talk that way, you're generalizing again in your comments.
I'm generalizing
right? by parties.
By pointing
you're
out
saying,
specific Republican presidents.
Well, no, you're talking about Republican presidents, but that
didn't.
doesn't mean that because Reagan's going to sign this order, or Trump's going to sign this order, or Nixon's going to sign this order, doesn't mean that the rest of the party agrees with them. There's always some pushback.
There's always some pushback. But
that's a problem. This is a pot that we get ourselves into.
Yeah,
that I think
it seems like a coincidence. It seems like a coincidence that every Republican president since Nixon has been opposed to firearms.
No, absolutely.
And people keep voting for Republican when they're a single issue voter for the Second Amendment. They vote for Republican because they think they're going to protect their gun rights. They vote against the Democrats because they think they're going to be gun grabbers. And it's been the exact opposite for the last 35, 40 years.
So I'd be curious to know what the other Republicans were saying at that time, but that doesn't even matter because we can't really trust what they're saying anyways. Maybe Reagan is going one way, right? And his Republican Party is actually going a completely opposite way with everything. Reagan was Republican, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, so his whole Republican Party is going opposite, but they may be going opposite just so they could preserve their seats in the House or in the Senate. So
I'm sure.
So they could be opposing Reagan but agreeing with Reagan, and vice versa. Same with Obama, right?
Sure.
If I was Obama and everybody thinks I'm going to take everything away and I'm this big boogeyman, if I give you your Second Amendment, which I know is going to be a very difficult thing to take away from you regardless, right? Because that's one of the things that Americans actually fight for harder than almost any other thing that's out there. Second Amendment has always been like on the top of they're not taking my guns. They could take it from my cold dead hands.
Even though the Second Amendment doesn't say that, because it says a well-regulated militia.
Right. But this is one of the things that they fight for. So even Obama, I mean, we're talking pure politics again on party lines, but we don't know that every Democrat agreed with Obama because Obama changed that.
No, he caught shit for that.
Exactly. So what I'm saying is it's hard to use one person. Obama, that may have been his belief, or he may have done it just because he was trying to preserve himself politically. And that's the other problem with politics, right?
This was in his second term, so he couldn't be voted down. And he did it because he was for common sense gun legislation.
So then that makes sense for him, but it's going to hurt the Democratic Party against certain people. So now they have to oppose Obama. Like it's this game that's always going on, but it's weird how we have our president and then we have our Democratic Party and we have our Republican Party, and they're all like, they're three individual people. They're not hundreds of individual people with their own mindsets. They're just three individual people. Republicans are all going to vote this way because they need to preserve their seats. Democrats are all going to work this way because they need to preserve their seats and their donors. Actually, that's what it's more about. It's about donors. It has, I don't think it has anything to do with anything else other than the billions of dollars that's coming into each of these party packs. So I don't know what the answer is. Like the stuff we talk about it because it's controversial.
Yeah.
But I know if you and I could come to some sort of an understanding, just even somewhat, then our political parties should be able to, and they're not.
They're not because
I know
right
there's
now
200 plus bills on the table for gun reform that the Republican Party won't even touch right now. But they can't because it's a political suicide.
They were busy at the NRA conference just a couple of days after.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that doesn't even matter. I mean, it's political suicide for them, and they know that. So, both parties are doing it with different things, right? Like the Democrats, they are all in for the transsexual, transgender nation going on right now. They cannot go against anything against that, or they're going to lose a huge portion of their people. They will, just because. So if they made, for example, I don't want to offend, but using...
It's okay. I saw your Facebook post a couple of days ago. You're not going to offend me more than that.
No. What I'm saying is boys that identify as girls going in and using girls' bathrooms. Mm-hmm. If the Democratic Party all of a sudden said, nope, that's not okay, we're not going to allow it. Now all of a sudden they've committed political suicide for that. They have.
Sure.
Whether you agree with it or not, it doesn't even matter. It's a political thing now, and that's what's going to keep them in office. And that's the whole thing with the gun laws that's going on right now with the Republicans. I don't know that they can come together for a common sense gun law, because once they do, now all of a sudden they're on the other side. I can't vote for them anymore.
Right. They need to decide that their power is less important than 22 people in Texas. They need to make a decision that the 212, and I counted, there's more than 212. There's more like 240 or so mass shootings just since January. We're in May. They need to decide that their political power is not as important as the lives of these people. Just do the right thing and then take the consequences. These guys and ladies, these people are masters at spinning.
But again, what is the right thing? I'm going to spin now. What is the right thing?
The right thing is common sense gun reform that we've been talking about.
But common sense between you and I are completely different.
Right. We need to look at statistics. You could start there and recognize that 39 of the last 62 school shootings have been done by people between the ages of 17 and 19.
You know what's
and
interesting?
Put laws in place so that we don't have to worry about
I'm going to stop you for just a second. This is really interesting. Now that you're talking to me, I'm thinking back. We have so many different phone calls coming through right now, right? And they're like, do you... we live in Arizona, so they're like, do you support Mark Kelly's this? Do you support Kristen Sinema's that? Do you support Governor Ducey's this? We have all of these things. I don't think I've ever seen anything come across that says, would you be accepting of somebody would you be accepting of a gun law that wouldn't allow people to buy guns until they're 21? I've never seen any statistical study done that way. Never, not once.
Yeah.
Which is interesting. It's interesting because it's such a huge topic. Same thing about anything that's really debatable right now, abortion, things like that. There's never any like statistical studies where they're calling people up, asking them about those type of questions, which are incredibly important, which makes me wonder if they do that by design, because this is a problem. If you don't ever solve the problem, it continues to be a problem. It gives you something to run on.
The divisiveness is beneficial for both sides. And we're losing our moderate center because, as you mentioned, with like LGBTQ legislation and stuff going on the left, and you've got other stupid ideas going on the right. If you buck one of those party lines at all, so I'm not even sure how to phrase this. We're losing our moderate center because people who speak from a place of common sense are shouted down by the extreme left and the extreme right. So there's no room for a conversation to take place because we're too busy screaming at each other. So you're never going to have this problem solved. It's going to be years before this problem is solved, I think. It's going to be swept under the rug. We're going to forget about it just like we did before.
We'll never forget about it. It'll always be out there, but it's going to be background noise because they have to have a problem to solve that they'll never solve.
It's just going to be one metric that they use to campaign for.
That's right. So going all the way back, it's funny. When we started our conversation, I brought up again, I told you that we give so much trust to these third world countries when we're on vacation and we just do whatever. We're just like, hey, nothing could ever happen to me. We give that same trust to our government, and it's trained to us all the way back in grade school, right?
Yeah.
They teach us to respect our government and to respect that they're out for our best interests. But just our conversation here about gun reform tells me that that's not always the case. Their best interest has to do with power and holding on to that power. And we, as civilians and citizens, we continue just to allow this to happen over and over again without demanding like some real justice, some real like common sense. So I'm not really like, I own several guns. You own several guns. I can't say I'm a pro Second Amendment advocate. I mean, unless I enjoy having my guns, I like to be able to go out and shoot my guns. If that makes me a Second Amendment advocate, I guess that's what I am. But I don't ever really look at myself that way. So I'm not like an extreme person. I'm not opposed to laws being put into place to help protect people. I don't think necessarily that those laws should be passed on to the gun makers. I don't think they should be passed on towards the NRA, saying that they should be held accountable for these because it's not them. I mean, you can't control mental health issues with people that are mentally ill. Like you just can't. Their parents shouldn't necessarily be in trouble if the kid steals their gun and goes out and commits a crime. Like it's horrible. Those parents are going to be punished for the rest of their life. Like they're going to. But I can't imagine what it'd be like being even the grandmother who was shot by that kid. And she's making a recovery. She's going to live, but she has to live the rest of her life knowing that this was her grandson. This was her spawn that did this horrendous crime. Like, I couldn't imagine being a parent or a grandparent of somebody that committed such an atrocity because, I mean, that's going to be punishment enough for those people for the rest of their lives. And there's nothing that they could have done about it. I mean, I guess they could have reported him cutting on himself. That's what they're going to have to live with. You've been listening to The Garden.